So now let's actually talk about the Agile Manifesto. We mentioned it in the last lecture, but let's go over it a little bit more in depth. The important thing to understand about this is Agile is a set of guidelines, the set of ideas that we then develop models with. So there isn't an Agile model out there. There isn't an Agile development process. There is the Agile guideline, and then we create models based off of the Agile guidelines. Something like Scrum, for example, is a model that's based off of these guidelines. So Scrum is the model. We would develop in Scrum, but Scrum is an Agile model. And that's just something important because a lot of people get this mixed up. They say, we're developing in Agile when that's technically not true. What they're doing is they're using a model that's based off of Agile. So Agile, again, is this manifesto. It's this idea. It's this set of guidelines that we use to develop software. And we can actually, if we want, we can put these numbers right here, and they are different sort of tenets or different ideas and guidelines. And a set of engineers, the story goes that they basically came together and they came up with this. I think it was somewhere in the early 2000s. They all met together and they decided that software engineering in general had an issue. There was a set of problems, and it was mostly because software engineering came from regular engineering. It was designed as almost a direct transition from, like building a bridge, and people thought, okay, we'll build software the same as we build a bridge. However, software is a little bit different, and there are slightly different requirements and ways of going about things when you talk about software. So they got together and they thought, let's come up with a way that would better the entire software development industry. And together they came up with these 4 tenets. And a lot of companies use these 4 tenets nowadays because they are basically a very, very good way of doing business. They increase productivity, they increase customer relations, and overall increase profit, which is what companies are going for. So the first one is individuals and interaction over process and tools. So this one is focusing on the individuals and the engineers and everyone involved in building the software over using some tool or some process that we've used in the past. And a lot of companies, whenever they sort of develop or they go in a way, they get a set of processes and a set of tools that they use. And if a team of engineers come up to a lead and they tell them, we think these tools and processes would be better, a lot of times those ideas are shot down because it's the way it's always been done. Those old processes and tools are already in place, so why change it? In this, we're trying to say that the individual should have more control over the way that they develop the software. If a set of individuals come together and they decide that a new set of processes, a new set of tools should be implemented to basically improve the situation, then they should have higher priority over the old way of doing things. And we want to sort of also, in this sense, we're saying that the individual is more important than the process and the tools themselves. We want to treat the individuals with respect. We want to treat the interactions that they have with respect. And we want to try to create a good work environment. We don't want to, put people down because they want to use new software and tools or because they're slightly deviating from the current processes and tools. We want to elevate our engineers and we want to give them the most respect as possible. Number 2 is working software over comprehensive documentation. And this is a pretty far deviation from the previous ideas that we've gone over, the waterfall methodologies and the sashimi models and everything like that. And this is because in those, it was very focused on documenting and getting everything squared away before we began developing. Here, though, we sort of turn that on its head, and we want a working software before, or at least as a higher priority than comprehensive documentation. Documentation is always important because it allows our software to be maintainable. However, there is a limit where if we have 15 books about how our software should work and how it's going to be built, we probably aren't going to be able to show that to anyone and actually get any real feedback on that. We want to create a working software with a little bit of documentation, maybe a medium amount of documentation, something we can give to the clients or to testers or to users and get actual feedback on that so we can make changes in real time. We don't want to wait till the very end to start getting feedback, realize something is wrong, have to change the whole software, and then have to rewrite all of our documentation. It doesn't make sense. So we want to focus on getting software working, getting software designed correctly, built correctly, over documenting the entire process. Again, we're not saying we're going to give up documentation. We're just saying we want to give a little more focus to getting the software actually built than working on getting it perfectly documented. Number 3, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. We want to have a good relationship with our customers and our clients. We do not want to have to point to a contract every time a change is wanted or every time something needs to basically just move a little bit. A lot of times with businesses, they get this contract and they'll point to the contract anytime something comes up and say, well, what's the contract say? Okay, we're not doing anything differently. What we're trying to say is that the customer collaboration is what's going to get us that good final product. If the customer comes in and they say, okay, I love where the software is going, but there's this new thing that recently came out and it's going to be, maybe the software needs a little bit of an addition here. Maybe it needs to be a little bit reworked there. We want to make the customer happy so that A, they give us good reviews, they pay us properly, all of that stuff. We want to make the customer feel appreciated. We want to make the process really, really nice for them. If every time they come in and ask for slight changes, we say, well, let's go rework the contract, we end up going into getting legal teams involved, readjusting prices and going through this whole thing, it's going to be a pain and no one's going to want to work with us. So what we're trying to say is that we want to make that collaboration paramount to or at least over contract negotiation. Contracts, again, they're still important. We're not throwing all this stuff out. We're just saying, let's talk to the customer more. Let's make a really strong relationship before we go and we just only work with contracts. 4, responding to change over following a plan. We want to be able to be flexible. We don't want to be locked into a certain plan, and every time an issue comes up, we say, well, what's the plan say? We're going to stick with the plan. If we can't respond to change, then we're not in and of itself agile. The word agile, we're not being that. We're not being flexible with our design process. And that's what agile is trying to do. It's trying to create an empowerment of the people who actually build the software and making software that changes with the times. Because technology changes fast, we don't want processes that don't allow us to change fast with technology. So we want to we want a plan, but we want to allow change to that plan. We want to allow us to be flexible, to move the software this way and that way whenever we collaborate with the customer. We're going to build working software so that the customer can see what is going on and they can give us ideas so that we can respond to the change. We want to have these individuals and interactions with both the customer and with our engineers so that new ideas, better ideas are presented. We can change our tools around. We can build working software. We can show it to our customer and we can respond to change. And so overall, that is the Agile Manifesto. We're trying to create this set of guidelines that allow us to change and move with the times, to allow us to develop software in a more optimal way, and Agile has done a great way of classifying that. In the next lectures, we're going to begin actually talking about the models that are based off of Agile, and you can see, you'll be able to see how these are quicker and faster ways of development than what we've previously talked about.